Thank you for having me today. I'm here to talk to you about leadership. And more specifically, I'm here to talk to you about how good leadership can help us build teams, generate movements, and lead those teams and those movements through uncertainty to overcome obstacles. I think one of the things that we can all agree is that the world we live in is fast-moving and it's full of uncertainty. I think that you can look at any number of examples from the rise of ISIS in the Middle East to wondering whether or not the chairman of Malaysian Airlines thought that he wouldn't just lose one airline this year, but two. And this uncertainty, this fast-moving scenario that we find ourselves in, it comes all the way down to our frontline employees, our small businesses, our sports teams here at home. So when I talk about leadership, I often use this parable of 100 men. The parable of 100 men comes from about 2,000 years ago in a Greek philosopher. He said, of every 100 men that go into battle, 10 shouldn't even be there. 80 are nothing more than sheep. Nine are the real fighters, and we're lucky to have them because they make the battle. But one is the warrior, and it's his job to bring all the others home. Think about that for a second. 10 shouldn't even be there. We call those people oxygen thieves. 80, they're just making noise. Nine, these are the ones that get it done, but there's one that's the warrior, the leader, and he brings all the other ones home. This talk is about how to find and coalesce those 9 and how to become more like the one. So I'm going to talk about my journey briefly. My journey starts about 15 years ago. I was a senior in high school, and I'd always wanted to serve my country in the United States Marine Corps, but after my senior year, I realized that I had the opportunity to go and play college football. I took that opportunity. I found myself at the University of Wisconsin in 2001. Now, it turns out I was a pretty shitty football player. I found out something else, though, in 2001. I found out, on 9/11 that our nation was going to be going to war. And it brought back the reality of my decision to not serve, but to go after and pursue my own dreams. Fast forward throughout those 4 years, we go to war in Afghanistan, we go to war in Iraq. I watch the Battle of Fallujah unfold from my living room. I see young men and women just like me kicking down doors in the most dangerous city in the world. Finally, I decide to take the leap and I enlist in the United States Marine Corps. I find myself in Iraq in 2007, young fire team leader, thinking that he knows something about leadership. I soon found when my squad leader was wounded and sent home, and I was promoted to corporal on the battlefield and given charge of 13 men, that I didn't know anything about leadership. I learned a lot about what it takes to build and coalesce a team over the course of 210 straight days of combat patrols in the Anbar province, which was also known as the Triangle of Death. It was the most volatile period of time during the Iraq War. And it was a lesson in leadership that I'll never forget. I came home and I had a decision to make. I could stay with my squad and I could continue to train them, or I could go and join one of the more elite units in the Marine Corps. And I made the switch. I joined the Marine Corps Scout Sniper Platoon, and after a grueling 13-week period in sniper school and a buildup of about 6 months with the team, I found myself in Afghanistan. We got deployed to a city called Sangin. It's in the Helmand Valley. And at this period in 2008 through about 2011, this was the most dangerous city in the most dangerous country in the world. So over the course of 7 months, I was the assistant team leader on a team, and every single night, we'd go out on patrol, walking through some of the most heavily landmined areas of the world. And I learned a lot more about leadership over the course of those 7 months. I learned that good leadership also means knowing how to follow. It means knowing how to lead from behind. It means knowing how to be a productive member of the team, no matter what your role is. I came back from Afghanistan in 2008, and I left the Marine Corps in 2009, not exactly sure what I was going to do next. In January 2010, I found it. I watched the disaster unfold in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I realized that after 2 tours, nearly 2 years of my life overseas, all the special skills that I had learned, the experiences that I had had overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan, that I was prepared to do something about this. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the uncertainty, the chaos, the limited resources. I knew that as a Marine veteran, I had the opportunity to help some of the organizations that would be down there, and I tried to go, but the organizations wouldn't let me. And so along with another Marine, we organized a team of 8 veterans and doctors, and we got to Port-au-Prince 4 days after the earthquake. For 3 weeks, we ran medical triage clinics all across the city, going to places that nobody else could or would go. And we discovered along the way that all we were doing was using counterinsurgency principles to deliver humanitarian aid. Think about that for a second. using the counterinsurgency principles that we had learned to win war, to win in combat, to help people in their greatest time of need. It's pretty simple, but it was kind of profound at the moment. So we started an organization called Team Rubicon. And the goal was to build an organization that could put those skills and experiences of returning military veterans, 2.5 million of them, to work in humanitarian zones around the world. In 2011, we came to understand that the power of this continued service, the power of this newfound mission, was more cathartic than anything that we could do for those veterans who were serving it. That mission could provide the purpose, the community, and the sense of identity that they so sorely needed as they were transitioning out of a life in the military. And so we saw a shift in the organization. We no longer saw ourselves as a disaster relief organization that was using veterans. We saw ourselves as a veteran service organization that was using natural disasters as an opportunity of continued service. The shift is subtle, but it was actually pretty significant in how we went about and did our business. Fast forward 5 years, here we are. We've got 20,000 members across the country, 28 full-time employees out in Los Angeles, California. We've deployed on about 75 missions over the course of those 5 years. And they range from the large, the Haiti earthquake, Hurricane Sandy, Moore, Oklahoma, Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines last year, to the small, floods in rural Nebraska, tornadoes in Louisiana, small landslides in Southern California, wildfires in the Pacific Northwest. And over the course of that time, we've deployed thousands and thousands of these military veterans in service to their community, giving them the opportunity to once again give back, to serve alongside one another. And so along the way, we've been doing this. You know, I told you that I got into the military, I came into the Marine Corps and thought I was a good leader. It turns out I didn't know anything about leadership. I got into entrepreneurship and I thought, hey, I learned all this great stuff about leadership. I'm gonna make a great entrepreneur. And then entrepreneurship smacked me in the face and said, you don't know anything. So what have we learned? Well, the first thing I always talk about, and one of the first things I cover in my book, is how to build high-impact teams, and this is really what I want to focus on today. So we define a high-impact team as a team of individuals capable or facing extraordinary circumstances with a high degree, high probability of failure, but in the chance of success, capable of accomplishing profound things. Now, this might be going out on the battlefield. This might be taking a team down to Port-au-Prince. It might be the opportunity to become the principal of a failing inner-city school and turn it around. It might be starting a new product line inside of a Fortune 500 company, okay? So the other thing about high-impact teams that we talk about is that they have to have these unique internal characteristics. They have to be foolish enough to think that they can succeed. Now remember, what defines these to begin with is that there's a high probability of failure. But they have to be foolish enough to think that they have a chance of success. They have to be daring enough to try. You'd be surprised how many people aren't. Then they have to be persistent enough to have a chance. So foolishness, daring, and persistence. That's what we look for. So we've built our team over the last 5 years. How did we do it? Well, we focused on culture first and foremost. Now, we have a saying when we hire people, passion trumps talent, but culture is king. We'll take passion over talent any single day. We have a lot of really talented people applying for positions in our organization. So we look for passion first and foremost. Now, those aren't mutually exclusive. If you find a passionate and talented person, they can quickly become the most high output member of your team. But even if it's the most high output member of your team, if they're not a cultural fit within your organization, they can quickly decrease the output of everybody around them. They can become so cancerous to the mechanics of your organization that they have to immediately be removed. And that can be challenging for a young leader, but it's absolutely critical. So culture, that's the first thing. Trust, that's the second thing. Before I get to trust, I want to talk one more time about culture. Most people conflate culture with perks. In the startup industry, people always talk about bringing their dog to work and no vacation policies. And hey, those are perks. At Team Rubicon, we don't track in and out times. We don't have a vacation policy. My pit bull comes to work with me every day. We have a kegerator in the fridge. Some people would say that defines our culture, but it doesn't. Those are the perks that we're able to offer our employees. Our culture is defined by how we go about doing our business. Our culture is defined by our values, how we hire and fire, promote, and compensate our employees. And how we go about our business is defined by these 4 values. And I apologize in advance because I still speak like a Marine sergeant. See shit that needs to get done. Get shit done. Thrive when shit hits the fan. And avoid bullshit. That is our culture. That's our culture, and everything that we expect from our employees is encompassed there. Do I have to hold your hand as we look at what are the threats and opportunities on the horizon, be it tomorrow or be it next year? If I tell you to get something done, is it going to be on my desk next week, or am I going to have to check in with you? Is it going to be done to the standard that we all accept and expect? When things get crazy, and they get crazy when you're running a disaster response organization, is everybody else going to look to you to bring order to the chaos? Are you going to be the person that brings calm to the chaos? And finally, avoid bullshit. Do you do what's right by Team Rubicon before you do what's right by yourself? That's what we're looking for. And that's the culture that we've built and the culture that defines our organization. Then I want to talk about trust, and I want to talk about it briefly because this countdown is making me nervous. Trust is the basis for everything. We define trust by common training standards, transparency through all levels of the organization. What are we doing and why? And finally, trial and tribulation. If you can bring those three things together within your team, common training so that everybody knows what to expect of one another, transparency and decision-making throughout all levels of your organization, and if you can experience some trial or tribulation along the way that galvanizes the team and makes it one cohesive whole, then you have the elements of trust that are necessary to take that team through just about anything. Finally, I want to talk about one last thing. Movements are tough, and they're wrought with danger, they're wrought with hurdles. There's going to be a lot of people that are wanting to see you fail. The uncertainty that surrounds entrepreneurship, that surrounds these movements, is the only certain thing in these movements. And so we rely as leaders on what we call the 80% solution. To do this, it requires leadership to step back and let their followers lead. It requires the commander, the leader, to issue a commander's intent, to say, here's what I want done, here's what I want it to look like, now go and accomplish it. In order to do that, you have to have trust. You have to have a high-impact team. You have to have people that are willing to follow you into that fire of entrepreneurship to make it happen. I want to thank you for the time today. I think there's going to be a couple of questions. All right.
Have a seat. All right. So the first question is, what's been the biggest cultural challenge you've experienced with a high-impact team?
We are a veteran-focused organization, but our full-time staff is about half civilian. And so there have been cultural challenges along the way of bridging that civilian-military divide. And it's not because, we're walking around barking orders with people, but I think that there is a certain element of mission accomplishment that comes from individuals coming out of the military, right? And so one of the things that we've had to train in our military veterans, there's a saying in the Marine Corps infantry, it's mission accomplishment and then troop welfare, right? So if you're told you have to charge the hill, you're going to lose some men, but you charge the hill anyway, mission accomplishment first. That doesn't exactly translate to the corporate world. You have to figure out a different way of doing it. And so, what we say is mission first, troops always, right? Your troops are never out of your mind. And so that's kind of helped us to bridge that cultural divide a little bit.
This is a really good question. How do you balance acting globally, like you've clearly done, and acting locally?
So the thing that we always say is every disaster is local. The vast majority of the missions that we run now are actually here domestically. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Logistics and cost have much, much higher thresholds when you're going overseas to a place like Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. But what we try to do and what we envision 5 to 10 years from now is a Team Rubicon in every community. We've got 20,000 members right now organized into 10 regions across the country. There's a disaster taking place every single day in this country. Now, you're not going to hear about it because it might be a flood in Bettendorf, Iowa, or it might be an ice storm in upstate New York. But there's a disaster taking place everywhere. So how do we make sure that communities are more resilient in advance of disasters? And how do we make sure that when some crisis does hit that community, that they're looking to their military veterans to help lead them through that crisis? That's the vision that we have, is redefining what it means to be a veteran and going home and repopulating these communities across the country.
What definition do you have for high impact? So what are you looking for most in this?
That's tough. I mean, you got to look at disproportionate returns, right? And how we really define that is difficult. When we are evaluating an operation that we run, we always look for economic impact, and we've set a threshold internally of an 8x return. So, for every dollar that we put into a response, we want to see an 8x return into that community. I think that would be defined as high impact. At the end of the day, we have two missions. One is disaster response and one is veteran reintegration. And they're both kind of challenging to measure. When you know that 22 veterans a day are committing suicide in this country, high impact is saving just one. So and we have done that. So I think that changing that culture for veteran reintegration is critical.
How do you tactfully avoid BS without burning bridges?
We just use big boy rules, right? We ask people to speak their minds. We have an open door policy. People feel free. People are empowered to call out BS as they see it throughout all levels of the organization. It's not uncommon for me to make a decision to perhaps not articulate the reason why appropriately, or maybe the argument just has flaws for why we're doing something, and have a junior associate walk into my office, close the door, and call me out. Or if I cut somebody off during a meeting, to have somebody grab me and pull me aside afterwards and say, hey, that was kind of rude, I feel disrespected. Now that's not being a whiner, that's just being upfront, being a grown-up, being able to talk to people even though it might be uncomfortable. And once you can break down those barriers, you'd be surprised how well-oiled an office becomes.
How do you start building a brand with a new team?
Well, you have to have a vision. Your vision has to be compelling, it has to be inspiring. No matter what you do, whether you're starting a new brewery in Indianapolis or whether you're starting a disaster response organization out of Los Angeles, you have to have a vision. You have to articulate that vision to everybody involved. And your business does not have to be sexy. Your mission does not have to be sexy. Because in order to create a vision that can inspire people, all you have to do is convince them that you're after becoming the best in the world at it. Even if it's data entry, we're going to be the best data entry company in the world. We used to measure our brand, the value that people were deriving from their participation in what we did, by our social media footprint. And we all know that's a terrible measurement, right? These vanity metrics, they actually mean nothing. How we measure our brand, how we measure our culture and the power of it now is by the number of Team Rubicon tattoos out there. It started with one, and now it's like spreading faster than Ebola, if you can, pardon the crude joke, but it's unbelievable. There's probably 50 or 60 volunteers that have tattooed the logo on their body, which means that we can answer the question in the affirmative. If Team Rubicon went away tonight, would it leave an irrevocable hole, an irreplaceable hole, a void in people's lives? And if you can answer that question and say, yes, our organization would do that if it disappeared, then you've built a brand that inspires people and you've articulated a mission that would have them run through walls.
What is your hope for businesses and veterans?
I want to convince people that veterans bring some really unique skill sets to the table. I think that veterans are really good at, by and large, good at leadership, they're good at followership, they're good at solving complex problems. They don't need to be told what to do. In Iraq and Afghanistan, it was one of the most ambiguous battlefields in history. You couldn't order people to win in Iraq and Afghanistan. You had to allow them to succeed, thinking on their feet. And so you have this whole generation of veterans coming home who can do more with less, work with limited resources, limited information, and come up with creative solutions, and they never accept failure. That's the great thing. It's cliche, but you can't fail on the battlefield. Nobody that failed on the battlefield came home. You have to find a way to succeed. So I think those are the things that I would like young entrepreneurs and business owners to understand about these veterans. They may not have the college pedigree, although many of them are going on and getting them, but they have some of these intangible qualities that whether you want them on the manufacturing line or whether you want them in the back office, I think that they're going to be really, really good at helping move your business forward.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.